Hey everybody, it's Mike Sullivan with Born to Shine. Today we have a great guest. Her name is Laurie Barron, and she's in Montana, up towards Canada, Quebec. I think it's called, I call it Calispre, but it's Calispre.
Kalispell.
Kalispell. Yeah, I wasn't even close.
Kalispell.
Kalispell, like a spell. Okay, perfect. Well, Laurie, thank you for being with us today, carving out some time. And what was your journey like to become a superintendent?
It was, I guess by most standards, probably pretty traditional. I graduated from high school. I went to college to be an English teacher. My major was English education. I finished in 4 years. I moved to a town I'm from Georgia originally, probably can tell. So I taught high school English for 6 years in Coweta County, Noonan, Georgia, just southwest of Atlanta. And I stayed in that Coweta County School District for 17 years. I was a high school English teacher for 6 years. And then I was a middle school assistant principal for 2 years, where I went very unwillingly for what it's worth. And then I was a middle school principal for 9 years, also went very unwillingly. Um, but I was one of those people who I really wasn't sure I wanted to go in administration, but I had done the coursework, and my supervisor had said, "You need to interview. It takes forever to get in." And then they moved me. Oh, and when I became a middle school principal, I was the fourth principal in 5 years in a building that had been opened 5 years earlier. And we had the lowest achievement, lowest attendance, highest discipline referrals. It was a very, very stressful circumstance. And we were able to turn that around and become one of the 5 schools in the nation named for high turnaround and high poverty schools. And it was just a really incredible experience. And then in the meantime, my husband and I and our family have been vacationing in Montana for years. The quick version is right before I lost my mother, who would have retired 3 months later, her final advice to me was not to wait to follow our dreams.
Mm.
And so we moved to Montana, and I became a school superintendent. This is my 12th year as the superintendent in the Evergreen School District. I still have the same 5 board members who hired me, which is just an incredible opportunity, very rare in the superintendency. I have 2 more board members now too, because we added 2, but I still have my original 5. And so now I'm living in the place I love, with the people I love, doing the work I love. 17 years in Georgia, 12 years here. This is my 29th year in education.
Okay, well that's great. And well, and to back up, sorry about your mom.
Yeah.
And she gave you some great advice. Don't wait to chase your dream. How did she
And
say it?
it was it was the greatest gift she ever gave me.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
So if you're a listener, if you're a admin, if you're a soup, assistant soup, director of curriculum, a parent, a teacher, or even a student, and if you're watching this, that was pretty great. Don't wait for your dream. Whatever you have inside, you have a gift from God, right? And He wants you to use it, and He's just waiting for you to share it.
And
So,
we wouldn't have gone without that push, because right after my mother's funeral, I was traveling, and my husband called me and said, "You're not going to believe this.
mm,
A job in Kalispell, Montana has opened up, and I think your
mm,
mom is calling."
wow, look at that. There
Few
you
days
go.
after her funeral. And so
Yeah,
anyway, we're not doing that. Yes, we are. We don't, but back anyway, we're in year 12.
yeah,
And
I
so,
love it. You're
uh,
12.
yeah, definitely a gift. And I feel very blessed to be here every day.
That's awesome. And when you were K-12, and we talked about it a little bit before, was there anything that you struggled with? And it sounded like not too much, which is highly unusual. It's fantastic. But maybe anyone in your family or friends or even students, someone that you're close to, that because most kids are struggling with at some level some form of anxiety or some form of depression. And we can close our eyes and plug our ears and pretend it's not going to go away, but unless we actually talk about it and destigmatize it and give them tools, it's just going to get worse. So is there anyone besides you that you deeply love that was really struggling, and then maybe someone helped them turn it around?
Yeah, I would say for me, I grew up in a 2-parent household. I have an older brother.
Hmm.
Um, we were probably lower middle class. We
Hmm.
struggled financially.
Hmm.
A great deal, but I never did without. My parents were very involved. You know, Probably the greatest thing they did for us is made sure we were involved in extracurricular activities outside of school. We know
Hmm.
connecting kids to something outside of the classroom is critical to overall success and well-being. And so we were my parents were very involved, but we did struggle, but we didn't do without. My older brother was a very, very successful athlete. Um, and my parents are no longer living, so it's just my brother and me, Dutch. And Dutch was very, very successful athletically, and I always felt a little overshadowed by that. And
Mm,
so I worked really, really hard to have some kind of recognition, I think. He's 2.5 years older than I am.
mm,
And when I was a freshman, he was a senior in high
mm,
school. And man, I loved being his little sister. Oh gosh, he was everything on campus, and I just
mm,
attached myself to him. But I always worked really hard to find recognition. I always felt kind of not good enough because he was so successful.
mm.
And so I did well academically, and I was involved in things. I was not athletic, still not very athletic. I'm a decent snow skier for what it's worth.
Yeah, cool.
Um, but I always struggled in that he had that limelight, and our family was very involved. And so and then I realized my brother, and he shares this publicly, so I'm not sharing anything personal. When he went to school, because he was so successful in school and so well liked and so popular and good looking and athletic and just a stud athlete. Um, he had a much harder time when he went to college,
Mm,
and because he kind of skirted by on a lot of those accolades
mm,
instead of the hard work, and
mm,
ended up making some really poor decisions, and ended up with alcohol and drugs, and ended up in jail. And a gentleman came and ministered to him, and
mm.
he was able to change his whole life. And
Amen.
yeah,
Amen
he
to
is.
that.
Yep. And then he went back to school and got his master's and bachelor's degree, and he now speaks a lot and does a lot of prison ministry, and just really, really proud of him. And he continues to be a source of inspiration for me. And I look at the struggles that he had, how successful he was in school, but there was a lot of underlying stuff that people didn't acknowledge or recognize. And so, um, I think about those students who I come from, the kids who look like they have it all together. There are many we know don't have it all together,
Hmm.
right? But where are the ones that look like they have it all together? And how are we reaching out to make sure that every kid really has an advocate and has someone to talk to and is working on future plans and is connected? Because our family was very connected. My brother was very connected, and yet he still struggled after school. And so my passion is, looking out for all kids. And we know some really struggle and we see it, but what are we doing to check on kids who might not show that they need that additional
And
support? So
most don't. Yeah, most
it's a,
don't.
it's a
What are y'all
passion for
doing?
me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you said you had some funding that came in and you're doing some neat new things. What are those neat new things?
Yeah, so we're really, we know that if a kid doesn't belong, if a
Mm,
kid doesn't feel safe mentally and physically, if a kid doesn't feel that he or she matters, that people care, that they're not there, right? We're not going to get very far academically. And so we're always looking at, let's make sure we get kids to school so they can be in that safe environment. Let's make sure that environment is safe mentally and physically. Then let's make sure they feel valued, they matter. And then it's a lot easier to teach. And
mm,
so, two things we're working on, both with grant funding. One is super exciting through Funders for Thriving Communities in partnership with the Montana Community Foundation. We received a grant this year, and we are using that grant for after school clubs for kids. So some of our kids maybe who are or aren't connected have that additional opportunity to connect with a teacher and work on things they choose that they love, that's their voice and their choice. And the other really cool thing we're doing with it is we have staff volunteer to
mm.
eat lunch during their lunch period in the cafeteria at the table with their kid, without their device, without supervising, without working. And we have, goodness gracious, we have probably about 40 staff who've eaten lunch with kids 175 times this year. And we just started it not late October because that's when we got the grant, and we pay for their lunch if they eat with a kid. I mean, it's a $4.50 investment
Yeah.
per day. But all of our staff who are doing it and our supervisors who are in the cafeteria are just really talking about that relationship building that's going on, right? You wouldn't believe how much when you improve those relationships over having a meal with a kid, it makes a difference when they come to your science class.
Mm,
And so we're really excited for that, and we're hoping it will continue to grow. We have a lot of adults, and we do it for every staff member, secretaries, custodians, teachers, administrators, district office staff, paraprofessionals, anyone can do it. And so it's been super exciting to watch all of those adults choose to spend part of their time that was supposed to be for them to go sit and build relationships with and get to know kids. And we're
Mm,
seeing good results from that. And that's,
mm,
sometimes you think, oh, that's frivolous. No, that's the heart, right? I'm telling you, the heart of the school is at lunch. Get in there, right? And
love
so, super excited to be able to do that with kids. And then another opportunity that has been really fruitful, more so than we ever imagined. We have a lot of additional services for students. Approximately 94% of our students qualify for free or reduced price meals, and approximately 29% of our students are on an individualized education plan.
it.
And we have a lot of services for students, wraparound services. We have a full health clinic in our school that does physical and mental health. You can go get, a well visit, a strep test. We have a psychiatrist who works there. We have mental health counselors. We have, access to food and clothing and hygiene products and after school care and things like that. But families weren't connecting to them as much. And we knew that we had families that needed it. And so through a grant with the Montana Healthcare Foundation, we were able to hire what we call a school and health community liaison. And that liaison over a 2-year period was able to connect 489 families to
Mm,
863 services. And when
mm,
I'm talking about services, I'm talking about mental health, physical health, dental health, food, housing, Boys and Girls Club connections for after school, clothing, transportation, insuring insurance, access to completing Medicaid forms, you name it. Don't have wood to heat our stove in the winter. It gets cold in Montana. Really have worked to connect families. And again, we've connected almost 500 families to almost 900 services over this 2-year period. And the results are just phenomenal. We have seen for students who did not have that connection
mm,
and they got the connection,
mm.
that group of students, we've seen a 64% improvement in attendance, which is our number one goal. Get them here, put them in that safe environment, right? Make them feel valued, then we can teach them. So a 64% improvement in attendance, a 55% improvement in behavior, and
Mm.
a 41% improvement in academic outcomes and performances, which tells us we got to take care of kids and make sure they're mentally and physically safe and provided for before we can ask them to learn. And
100%.
so we're
100%.
seeing incredible results. We were able to share it. We had the really cool opportunity in September to share our journey because we're still looking for more school funding for these safety opportunities for kids on Good Morning America through the Green Lights Grants Initiative with Matthew McConaughey. And we certainly appreciate the attention that he has brought to the importance of school safety funding for physical and mental safety. And so we just continue to advocate for that or continue to provide funding for that. So I guess, of course, there's a lot going on, but those are two that really stand out to me. That opportunity to eat lunch with kids every day and
Right.
provide those after school clubs that we couldn't have done because we don't have the funding. And
Right.
then the opportunity to connect families to services where we continue to improve outcomes for kids.
Now, what would you like to see more of? Because every superintendent I'm blessed to talk with, they have many things in place, but they still know it's not enough. Is there anything you'd like to see in a perfect world to add to that? Add to the two things that you're doing now? And just to dream, what would you like to see more of for your kids to get more actual tools, right? The lunch every day is awesome. And the word you said over and over, and I hear this from a lot of superintendents, are relationships,
Yeah.
right? Building that relationship is so key. Are there other things, what would you like to see more of, I guess, in the coming year to add to that?
Yeah. So my dream is to be able to continue that school and health liaison, that community liaison.
Yeah.
And then I would really like to, and part of what we're trying to get grant funding for is to add some additional certified teachers at each building that are student support,
Hmm.
right? Behavior specialist,
Hmm.
intervention. The more that we can put adults on campus, because we know every kid needs an adult advocate.
Hmm.
And if we can get more adults on campus who can work with kids and help keep kids in class, instead of we have so few that every time there's a need, the kid has to come out of class and then he's losing out on community building, right? He's away from his peers, losing out on instruction, losing out on learning, right? If we can provide supports that help kids build strategies and tools so that they can regulate themselves inside of a classroom or very briefly outside of a classroom and get back in, our goal is how do we keep kids with their community?
Mm.
With the people who will help them, right? We need to be around people who are different than us, who believe differently, who think differently, who act differently, who have different skills and abilities. And when we remove kids so often because of the struggle, we remove that community. And
Mm,
that's a huge piece to overall success for a kid. And so, really, if we could get more certified staff inside of our buildings to help kids learn those regulation, those self-regulation skills, and to support teachers who are working super hard to address
right.
the needs of 25 kids that's sitting in front of them,
Yeah.
and they can't do that one-on-one for 30 minutes,
Right.
right? So having those additional staff would be huge for our students.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And you're doing a great job, Lori. I mean, those two elements you are bringing in, I'm sure are helping, and you shared the percentages, some of the data. And then there's the third element that you're dreaming of, I think would be obviously helpful. Kids never get enough support. You know, we all need it, even when things are good, because sometimes it can change real quick from good to horrible. So it's good to have that caring adult that can provide them with the tools. That's the key, right? To have self-regulation and learning coping skills and so many things. So that's great that you have that in the dream pipe. And if there's any parting words or like, I guess, words of edification or encouragement to whoever's watching this, what would you like to say to her or him?
For me as a school superintendent, I think one of the big risks, and it happens when we become a building administrator too, right? The further away from the classroom you are, the harder it is to empathize and understand what's going on in the classroom, even if we've done it before. And so, particularly, I would say for superintendents, I work really hard to stay engaged with staff, be visible, to visit classrooms, to hold myself accountable for making sure I interact with every single staff member that, I see kids and I want them to know me. And it's hard when I'm in a different building, I'm not in a school. So I would say a high priority, if we're really talking about building relationships and helping kids belong before we can teach them and they can become what they have the potential to become, is making sure we stay engaged. And that's so hard with all the reports that are due and the budget and policy and audits and funding and things like that. But it's just critical to stay engaged with your people that you're serving and you're working with.
Love it, Lori. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today and what y'all are doing out in Montana for your kids.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I feel really blessed to be in this role.